First and foremost, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for joining me. This is doesn't seem real to me.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Even though I'm a POG, even though I'm a POG, is that
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, like, why is life great right now?
Yeah, life is great right now, and it's great always because of the support system I have.
Yeah.
Obviously we were talking off camera about my husband
Mm-hmm.
Steve, and like his support is just endless. And he's just a great listening ear when I'm upset about wrestling, when I'm happy about wrestling, when I'm bummed about it, when I'm excited about it. But then also to which to me means a lot more is like our personal lives, and he's championing me to get my master's degree and to be all in that and to apply for internships and things like that totally outside of wrestling. So life is great because wrestling's good, but our personal life is even better.
That's what I love when I'm a big fan of yours, because to me, you're big time in the pro wrestling world. And I don't feel like the AEW women's roster division gets enough credit because it is so stacked where it's unbelievable. But you talked about these different things. You talked about Southern New Hampshire, right, where you're going to school. And I saw you in the commercial. I think that's been a popular thing. And your degree's in history. Is that right?
Yeah. So I actually finished my bachelor's at Southern New Hampshire University last summer. And back in September, I started my master's at Liberty University.
Nice.
For political science.
Awesome. I want to tie that in because, like, you're so much more than a pro wrestler, right? Like, you have all these other ventures. I've listened to you on quite a few podcasts over the years, but do you mind talking about paying off mortgages for first responders? Isn't that something you're passionate about or trying to work on?
Yeah, so Steve and I just actually started working with Tunnel to Towers, and we have another commercial coming out like any day now. It should be out. Tunnel to Towers champions, again, paying mortgages for first responders and veterans who lose their life in the line of duty. Obviously, we're a military household. You're, active duty in the military right now. That's something that is so near and dear to our hearts because and not even me personally, because Steve and I weren't together when he was, in the military, but knowing what it means to him, how it shaped him, and what it means to these families who lose a loved one, but then know that on the other side they can be taken care of. And, the last thing you want to do, while you're grieving is worrying about paying your mortgage or how are your bills going to be paid. That's the last thing anyone should be worrying about, especially when it's a loved one who, put their life on the line for this country every single day. So that was when we got the opportunity to work with Tunnel to Towers. Was like, holy crap, that's amazing. And something like, how do we sign up for that immediately? No questions asked. We don't care what you need from us. We want to do that and be a part of that organization.
No, that's great. I can see the coin rack behind you, and that's military thing, right? And so how important is it for people, if they have a big platform, to use that big platform, a big voice? I've actually heard you reference that before, but how important is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge, right? Like, tying in wrestling with all of these other avenues that we're interested in. Wrestling is so niche, right? But there are first responders who like wrestling. There are military who like wrestling. So to bring those worlds together and use our platform to say, hey, I'm more than just this thing. This is who I am as a person, and this is what interests me in my real life or has affected me in my real life. Let us bring you into that. And wrestling fans actually really do love that. They love to know, especially for women's wrestlers, what's going on in our real lives. So to give that little insight and say like, hey, if you support me in this, maybe you'll also support me over here. And with Tunnel to Tower, it's an $11 a month donation. But, I've advocated for teachers with Amazon's hashtag Clear the List. And every summer I run a fundraiser with merchandise for them, and I supply, back to school supplies for teachers across our country. And wrestling fans have been so in tune to helping me do things like that. So to use that platform for the good of the world, and that has nothing to do with wrestling, has brought me like the most fulfillment and the most joy.
I love that because, so Steve, your husband Steve, was on my podcast a couple weeks ago. I just had Buff Bagwell on my podcast 2 nights ago, and I'll be releasing that in a couple weeks. You're on it tonight, and I've had my friends ask me, like, why are you having wrestlers on? To me, there's so many similarities between the wrestling community in the wrestling world and the military because people do support one another. So that's really cool that you're kind of just bridging all these different things. I want to transition to wrestling, and Actually, I want to ask you a question. I prompted Chat GPT. So I want to, yeah, and it's just an interesting question. I was like, this is good. But I do have to read the question off but here's the prompt. Provide a question for one of the world's best professional wrestlers, women, female, I'm getting tongue tied. Provide a question to ask one of the best professional wrestlers in the world who goes by the nickname Virtuosa. So here's the question that ChatGPT provided. Virtuosa suggests mastery and excellence. What drives you to continuously strive for greatness, and how do you balance perfection with the natural imperfections of growth?
Ooh, ChatGPT, man, I'm new to ChatGPT.
I'm gonna give some credit to me though, because it's all about the prompt, right? So I'm gonna still a little bit of AI, but there's some MF in it too, right? There's some MF in it.
Yeah. Okay. Read me the question one more time.
I'm gonna do kind of like the setup for it too. It says, Virtuosa, your nickname suggests mastery and excellence. What drives you to continuously strive for greatness, and how do you balance perfection with the natural imperfections of growth?
Oh, I don't. So if I'm honest, I don't balance it well. I don't balance being imperfect with striving for perfection well. I am a perfectionist and I'm a control freak, and I don't balance it well because, like, when I don't perform my best in the ring, or I don't, speak my best in a promo, or I don't get my point across the way I'd like to, I lose sleep over it for like weeks at a time. And I still think about matches that I've had years ago, thinking like, oh, I could have done that differently, and that maybe that would have got a better reaction. So I will admit that I do not balance imperfection with perfection great, but I think that striving for it, I just continuously try to like re-inspire myself and find new things that I love about wrestling.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, even if it's just like gear and things like that, like I'm constantly thinking about like what would look better on my body, or what color would look better, or maybe these feathers today, or this skirt tomorrow, or I love wrestling so much, so constantly being around it, constantly watching it, or reading about it, or thinking about it, like that's how I aim to be perfect in this like imperfect world that we have to live in. Like I'm just constantly trying to like study and get better in the gym and get better in the ring and train in the ring and work on my technique and things like that. Like there's so many little pieces that make a perfect wrestler, and if we are constantly working on one piece at a time, then hopefully we can be the full package
or the masterpiece. Man, so many great things just to pull from that. I know you've talked about like was it the Iron Man match or the Iron Woman match with Jordan Grace? Was that like 2 years? Yeah, just a great match. But like I'm the same way. If I go back and watch myself, like even my own podcast, I'm like, oh my god, I was so horrible. But it's just. But no, you're so great, and your ring attire's excellent too, because that matters a lot too. People, that's from the minute you walk out, right? It's a thing.
Yeah, Virtuosa is not like some like outlandish crazy character. She's not the Macho Man Randy Savage in terms of like charisma, right? And I can admit that. So there's those little things that I'm like, okay, I'm not the most charismatic and I'm not the most outgoing, but what can I be great at? I can make a statement the minute I walk out of the ring. People who might not know what a virtuosa means by definition, but if you hear the orchestra music play and you see how elegantly I walk to the ring, you're going to understand it whether you know it or not, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And there's a sense of, I don't think you give yourself enough credit for how real and authentic and relatable that you are, because I get that sense, especially with the more, you talked about a few minutes ago, people are interested in what wrestlers do outside of the ring. And I've seen you on a lot of podcasts or just, short YouTube clips over the past, let's call it 2 years or so. I'm a big fan of Chris Van Vliet, and I know you've done his podcast a couple times, and I've listened to both or watched both episodes, but you did one recently, I think back in September or October. And I've had the opportunity to meet Chris in person, and he's always so great and so kind to me, and I messaged him after that interview, and he's done so many amazing podcasts, but I told him, I said that your episode with him, I'd say was like one of his top 5 of all time, because, and not so much of the questions actually, even the way that he was asking questions, but the way that you were just answering your questions and just the different things that you talked about, it just almost became like, man, like a rally cry for people to surround you, almost in your own way becoming a people's champ. It was so good, and I just want to give you that positive feedback that I thought that
Thank
was one of
you.
the best interviews he's ever had, and he's had some bangers, but man, that was just, again, just the authenticity and just the realness that you spoke about. Man, it was so good. It was so good.
I feel like, again, like, and maybe that's part of answering your question, right? Of finding that balance between imperfection and perfection. Like, we can't be perfect people. No one is the perfect person. But what I can offer is my authentic self every single time you meet me. I'm going to be, whether I'm being nice and friendly or I'm angry, you're going to know how Deonna Purrazzo feels, whether I say it or it's written on my face. And it's funny because I actually said that to Steve the other day. Like, I just had like a backhanded comment, like, and we started laughing, and I was like, hey, you know, you're never not going to get the truth with me. And he's like, and that's why I love you. If I can offer my real opinion, my real true self to every single person I meet, you can't, like, you can never hold that against me. I'm being real. I'm being my perfect self
Mm-hmm.
every single day. And I own that. I own those mistakes. I own the things I'm not good at. I own my weaknesses, and I own my strengths. And that way it can never backfire, and you can never hold it against me.
The girl from Jersey, right? Like, that's yeah, the girl from Jersey, of course.
True and true.
Where how did you come across, and I know you've discussed this before, but I have a lot of people who may not know who listen to my show, but how did you come across or come up with the name, the Virtuosa? Because it's so different and unique, and it does stand out.
Yeah, thank you. I was in Ring of Honor in 2015, and I had wrestled a couple matches there, and they were just kind of like, something's missing. You know, we need, Deonna Purrazzo's great. It's your real name. But we need like something behind it, some more character traits to you. And I took a while to like land on Virtuosa because it's Italian, and a lot of people might not know what it means, and you have to look it up if you don't,
Yeah.
right? And so I always thought, like, oh, it might be difficult to say, people don't know what it means, like, maybe I just need something a little bit more plain. But then I just said, like, I don't want to be the mechanic or the technician, or, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot that you can do with Virtuosa, and I've been able to evolve it through the years. But yeah, it was just kind of delirious at Ring of Honor pushing me to be like, okay, you're great and you have so much potential, but we need more. We need to draw more out of you. What could you bring to the table?
Yeah, I kind of want to just go on that a little bit because you do bring a lot to the table, and I didn't say the word fighter earlier. It kind of came out with your, like, I feel like the Jersey was coming out of you in a way. Like, you were just, I'll give you the truth. I'm like, man, no one asked you, Deonna, but like, you know, I guess we'll take the truth. But but like a fighter too. But I think that's what shaped you. And to me, I think it's almost in a way benefited you that you went from, you know, NXT, and you've been in Ring of Honor and TNA and now AEW. But how can being told no help build resilience and shape personal growth, even though it might initially feel discouraging?
Yeah, I feel like it's funny, from, and not even just in my wrestling career, but like in my real life, when I was a cheerleader, when I was a gymnast, like, I have been told no more times than I'd care to admit in my entire life. And so I think that that was kind of always ingrained in me, of like, no is just a no for now. But if you come back and you fight, and you prove them wrong, like, I'm a big out of spite kind of person, and when my back's against the wall, I'm going to do my best work. And so I think that I've been like that since I was a kid. But it's specifically in wrestling, you know, it's funny, off camera you were talking about, like, you know, there's just a line of 5'2"
Yeah.
brunettes. Like, literally that was told to some of us. Like, you're just a 5'2" American brunette. You're just a 5'2", you know, Canadian brunette. Like, we need more, and we have too many of you. And so I think that shaped me in terms of, like, again, I'm going to work on those imperfections. I'm going to train till I run myself in the ground. I'm going to wrestle. I think it was 2016, I wrestled 105 matches for the year. Sometimes I was wrestling 3 matches a day in front of an audience, because I wanted to perfect my wrestling craft. So sure, I might be the 5'2" brunette, but you're not going to find someone who's a better wrestler than me. You're not going to find someone who could hit their times and get the business done and do this and do that all at the same time seamlessly. Being told no forced me to say, I'm going to look at the things that I can control, and I'm going to perfect them. And I think, again, it was like out of spite. You know, it started when I was a child, but it started, when I was an extra at NXT 2015, 2016, 2017. It started when I got released from NXT in 2020. Going to TNA, being like, oh, I have a chip on my shoulder to prove these people wrong. And I still feel that way now at AEW, where, I'm not really in the mix where I'd love to be. And so now it's, okay, what do I need to do to get you to see that potential in me? Because I know it's in me, and we've seen it in me before, but now I need to prove it here. So keeping that hunger and keeping that like chip on my shoulder has, I think, made the difference of my career.
And I know how old you are, and I've because I've researched and stuff like that. But you look very young still, and you have so many years ahead of you for wrestling. But you're still so young, but you're like such like this veteran, because you started. You kind of got started at 18, right, or 19.
Yeah.
So it's kind of in a way like the prodigy or the Virtuosa prodigy. I don't remember which podcast I heard it in, but people often talk about, oh, just give me an opportunity, but they're often not prepared to meet the opportunity. So do you mind just talking about the importance of being creating opportunities for yourself, and then in addition to that, being prepared to meet an opportunity that might come your way?
Yeah, I think that in a lot of times, and this really started like when I was in NXT, I can create like boxes of like a checklist in my head of like, okay, if I've changed my hair color, which I did a million times, if I get all different colored gears and different gear designs, and I can do that, check. I can control that. I can control how many times I'm in the gym and when I'm showing up to class and how I act in class. I can control filming vignettes for myself and pitching them. I can control all of these things over here. So that way, if the opportunity doesn't present itself, I've done everything that I could possibly think of within my own control to say, well, I tried. And so maybe that gives me the excuse of like, it wasn't on me because I did everything I could. But at the end of the day, it's like, I did everything that I could possibly do to make this work. And on top of that, being in the gym, being in the ring, being consistent, when that opportunity presents itself, eventually it will, and again, just to be real, like talking about imperfections, there has been opportunities that I've had to be in and not been ready for. And so that gives people an excuse to say like, oh, we told you she wasn't ready. And that's something that I don't like dealing with. I don't like that feeling. So yeah, it's like, okay, well, what else could I do? I could check all these boxes. And I could take that feeling of like, ooh, I don't like how that felt. I wasn't prepared. I wasn't at my best. I wasn't 100% in that opportunity. Now I'm going to work 10 times harder so that never happens again.
Matt Cardona talks about that too, where, and he's done so well for himself on his own. But he talks about, here's the things like, I don't remember what the third thing is, but 2 to 3 things were your attitude and like your body, right? And he's worked hard, but those are, but to your point, those are the things you can control. The training and just the mindset. Looking back on your career, do you ever look back on something that was like something that was once considered like a really rough patch, but now now in 2025 you look back and say that was actually a blessing in disguise?
Yeah, I have talked about this before. Being in NXT and being released, that whole like 18 months, 2 years period of my life, like when it was over and I was released, I went on every podcast, every platform that would talk to me and give me time, and was like, F it, and I just like went on a media tirade of how bad I felt I was treated. And I do stand by those statements. Like I'm like, that was my experience, but that was 25-year-old Deonna looking back, feeling like I was really treated horribly. 30-year-old Deonna, 5 years removed, can look at that and say like, yeah, I was treated bad, but like, 1, everything happens for a reason. And 2, how did you grow from that? I took all those no's and I created the Virtuosa that no one knew was possible. No one believed in. I took those ideas and the trials and the tribulations that I went through in NXT and was able to say like, that's where you thought I was weak at. I was weak at promos. I can admit that. Okay, TNA gave me every week to go on and cut a promo, so I'm going to nail it every single time. Like, I really was so negative about that experience as soon as it ended. But 5 years later, I can say like, oh wow, it actually taught me a lot about the person I wanted to be outside of wrestling, but also exactly who I could be in wrestling. And again, that's just taking those no's and saying like, I'm a big out of spite person. We're gonna do this in spite of you, and no one's gonna be able to tell me otherwise.
What's your advice for people? Like, what are your tips for people to not only want to survive criticism? Oh, what I was going to say is, what I tell people is, you know, we always hear the phrase, "Oh, you got to take the L," right? Sometimes life just be life, and you got to take the L. People think L is for loss. True, but I also add to that where when someone tells me take the L, I always tell people like, yeah, but I want to take the lesson, right, as well, because even in the failure, there's still a lesson. And this lead,
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
yeah. So take the L, take the take the lesson. So I referenced earlier about you being so relatable, and this is where I was kind of going when I was just stumbling. What is your advice for people who not only want to survive from criticism but grow from it?
Yeah, I think it's to be honest with yourself, right? I think that unfortunately in today's world, especially if we're going to relate this to the wrestling world, everyone has social media. Everyone feels like they have a voice and an opinion that needs to be heard or shared. And, you know, even as wrestlers, we see that, you know, and I think I have pretty thick skin. I can take a lot of criticism, but things penetrate our deep skin and it does hurt. We're human beings too. And I think that being honest with yourself and saying like, you know, at the beginning of last year, I went through like a ton of body shaming when I started at AEW, and it made me very, very self-conscious and to the point of like, you know, I felt uncomfortable at home in my own skin. And so taking that and saying like, that doesn't make me feel good, but again, like, what else can I be doing for me so I can avoid that ever happening to me? Like, I don't like what people are saying. It's making me not like how I feel about myself. What can I work on? You know what I mean? And I was in therapy for other things, but that was part of it, of like, I'm going to work on myself and my mental health and my strength and just be honest with myself. If that hurt me and I don't like that and I didn't like those critiques, and so what more can I be doing over here to lessen that? But what can I learn from that about myself and make myself stronger from it? And so I think that if everyone had that mindset of like, I don't have to agree, I don't have to disagree, but I can just take it for what it's worth. We can learn something from it and take those experiences and be stronger for them. And I think that's like what I try to do is like, okay, that critique, how can I fix that? Or how can I make it not matter in the future and not like stick in my brain and affect me?
And I love the pop you got when you made your debut with AEW in Jersey, right? Yeah, that was really cool. I love seeing that stuff when like the hometown person or whatever gets the big cheer. I meant to ask you earlier, and I know you talked about this, like losing your love for wrestling, but then in this podcast, our episode specifically, you talked about like just being reinvigorated. But I wanted to ask the question in a different way that I don't think you've been asked before. But was there just like a random specific thing that that you've never talked about, like just even if it was like a random comment on social media that just like sparked that re-love for wrestling?
I don't think there was anything on social media. I think, and I have talked about this a little bit before, but I don't think TNA, for me it was Impact, gets enough credit for it. I think what really sparked that love was the environment. Reinvigorated me was the environment I was in. And I feel like, I hate to use this phrase, but you know, TNA calls itself like, and everyone calls it the land of misfit toys, right? And everyone kind of comes there with like either a chip on their shoulder or like, oh, I don't know what's next for me. And they find a home there because the camaraderie that's built, because the love that's built, like it is a company built on passion. And everyone there is looking to like carve out a place for themselves, but also carve out a place for the company. And I think that's what sparked it for me, was like everyone just kind of like opened their arms for me when I walked in the door and was like, and you're with us now, you're one of us. There was no like adjustment period. It was just like I walked in and it was like I was always there. It was like I lived there my whole life and I was coming home. And it was like a really weird feeling because I hadn't felt that in a long time leaving NXT, and I didn't expect, just from some of the personal stuff I went through, to have such a warm welcome. So that first moment was like, oh, this is like, is this home? I think this might be home.
Yeah.
And that was the spark. That was like, these are people I want to work for. These are people that I am passionate about the people that I work with, and I want to work for them. And we see all the matches that I've had that I feel like you can tell that through the screen, right? You can see the passion that especially the knockouts division has for the legacy we have, but the legacy we're trying to create while I was there, to continue to do the work. So that was it. It was the passion of the locker room and the company that really sparked me again.
It comes through with that company specifically. Like, you can feel it. And even over the past couple of years, they continue just to kind of like carve out more and more. So I have a few more wrestling questions, then I have some really fun lighter questions that I think are definitely going to make you smile. But
Okay.
yeah, I have a couple more because you've experienced a lot in your wrestling career. Have you ever felt a tension between what you felt was right and what someone was pressuring you to do?
No, I don't think so. No, I also feel like as we've been talking for about 30 minutes now, like I'm a very strong-minded person.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't fall into that trap very often, and I'm not the one that they could pull the wool over me. But no, I don't think I've ever felt like pressured to do something I didn't want to do, because I'm just the type of person to be like, I don't know, can we curse? Fuck it.
Do it. Yeah, no, yeah, go for it. I mean, that might be the name of this episode. Fuck it, comma, Virtuosa, right? So how does this, I got to poke at Steve a little because you mentioned a couple times about being stubborn. So like, you're like, you know what? I'm a stubborn person. I should marry a Marine because Marines aren't known to be stubborn, right? Like, and a stubborn guy, and he's from Jersey. Like, girlfriend, what are you thinking here? Like,
for real, like we look at each other and, like we married 2.5 years
congratulations.
now. And like we have talked about we want a family one day, and we look at each other sometimes and we're like, we're screwed. If there is a little one of us, like both stubborn, bullheaded Jersey people, we're screwed when there's a little one of us.
Imagine your child with Steve's personality, but your fashion sense or something, right? I mean, just like, I think that's
cheetah head to toe.
Yeah, it'd be glorious. It'd be glorious. One last wrestling question. And we've talked about this you've touched on this briefly, but there's so many keys in order to be a successful pro wrestler. It's so obviously the in-ring work is a must. You have to be great in the ring, but mainly I think just the ability to think on your feet. How do you hone that? What do you do specifically to hone that ability?
Yeah, honestly, when I started training, everything was on the fly. Everything was on your toes. So my trainer did not let us plan anything, plan spots. All the drills we did were like, one specific drill was you kind of start like as if you were in the heat of a match. So you cut off, the baby face, you're the heel, and you run like pins for the hope spots. And so duck one, crossbody, it counts as one, and then they go back on the cell, and then you whip them to the corner, you say move schoolboy, that's 2, and we would have to do 30 of those, and I think once I did 50 of them, and there's no planning, it's all on the fly in the ring. So from day one of my training, I was 18 years old when I walked into my wrestling school at the time. That's all I did. All the training was on the fly, on your toes. They don't hear you, you mess up, you gotta fix it. Once I got experienced into learning how to do matches and call matches on the fly, then it was, you have 7 minutes. Oh, just kidding, they changed it as you're going through the curtain, the bell just rang, you have 5. Just keep you on your toes. And those are real scenarios that I've run into doing matches in front of an audience or on live TV. Time gets cut all the time. Especially for the women. So that's real life, applicable training that I had since day one. So it's kind of just ingrained in me. And, as I don't train as, hard anymore or as religiously like that anymore, it's always fun when I get in the ring to your brain just keeps moving and moving and moving, and know that that's just ingrained in who I am. I don't have to worry about training to do that anymore because I trained for 10 years like that. So it's a huge part of what we do, but I feel like I got such great training from day one that it's not something I've ever had to stress out about. I'm just we'll go with the flow. There was one time recently I was in the ring and we had a break, and it was like 2 minutes 45 seconds is the break, and the girl and I are just like kind of calling stuff on the fly. Like she was chopping me in the corner, and I was like, I'm gonna duck, and I kept chopping her, and the ref was like, oh, you have 90 seconds, and I was like, oh, maronami, like, which loosely translates to like, oh, Jesus Christ, like it's so long, like, and so I just started to like make jokes out there, and she got to the back, and she was like, oh my God, you were so relaxed, you're laughing out there, and I'm like, yeah. This is all I know, you know.
Chaos. That's what makes what makes you so great is, again, you're young, but like you have like this like 20-year vet.
Oh, I was the baby when I started wrestling. I say this all the time. Like, so I'm 30. I just turned 30 last summer. I'll be 31 this year, and I have been wrestling for, this will be my 13th year. I just started my 13th year of wrestling. So I'm not the baby anymore. Like, there's 22-year-olds who are wrestling that I'm like meeting now that I'm doing some indies. I mean, I'm one of the oldest people in our locker room, and I'm like, no, you can't be the baby because I'm the baby. But in my brain, I'm like a 45-year-old vet who has to remember that like I'm not old by any means whatsoever. And you know, there are older people than me in our locker room, but in my brain, I'm like, I've spent my entire adult life doing this. I've not done anything else. Like, I feel like the 40-year-old vet who's been doing this for 40 years. Sometimes when I'm talking to these like 18, 20-year-old kids who are just starting.
Now, I can relate. So I'm retiring from the military this year after 23 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll be 44 this year. But I joined, and I was telling Steve this, I joined because of 9/11. I was 21 when I came in. So, you know, pretty much all my 20s. And I had just gotten married. I'd only been married for 2 months before I left for basic. So all my 20s, all my 30s, and like a good dent into my 40s. So this has been my whole adult life. But I have... you know, I meet 19-year-olds all the time, and they're like, "Oh, I'm doing the math. Like, dang man, they were born in this year, and I was already in for a couple years." But anyway, so I do want to transition to some lighter questions, and I'm pretty excited to ask you this one. So, are you ready, Deonna Purrazzo? Are you ready to think on your feet? Yeah, you know, hook down, schoolboy, whatever, right? All right. I know that you're a history major, right? So. What historic? Yeah, here, no, I'm not going to ask you like, you know, what was the battle of this? The Battle of Trenton. What historical figure do you most identify with?
Ooh, that's it. So I don't identify with JFK at all. My brain always goes to him because he's my favorite. That's a great question. I don't know.
Can I say Jackie O? Is that okay? Like,
I would be honored for you to say
Jack.
that.
I'm just gonna put it out for the universe. Jackie O.
Yes. What's so funny is, I lost the Knockouts World Championship, to bring it back to wrestling real quick, to Mickie James at Bound for Glory 2021. And then they were like, you're gonna kind of go like, we called it Dark Deonna, like, you know, you're not going to wear like sparkly things and bright colors. Like, I wanted to be Jackie O at the funeral, black, big sunglasses. And so that was a huge inspiration for like just a little chunk of my wrestling career. But like, I love her. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I am Jackie O. I am her. Her affinity for like art and culture that she brought into the White House. Excuse me. All those things. I'm Jackie. I'll take it.
Okay. Love it. Okay. Okay. Here's another history question, but I'm going to tie it into wrestling.
Okay.
If you could take your, you know, whether you can think of three, if you have a bunch, pick your three favorite women from history of all time and make them into one super wrestler, which three women would you pick?
Oh, in wrestling history?
No,
or
just any history. Yeah, so it could be a combo. You could take, you know, three women wrestlers. You know, you can do Jackie O and, you know, Mickie James and one other person. So if you can combine three women into like whether wrestling or non-wrestlers, or, you know, Amelia Earhart or something like that too. But, you know, pick three women from whatever generation, time, era, you know, thing in life, profession in life, and make them into one like super female wrestler. Who would you pick? And then what would their name be?
Oh gosh. Okay, I've never been asked these types of questions
Sorry.
before. And I've never really like I like history, but like I've never like zoned in on
You're gonna
women's
tell
history.
Steve I'm never talking to a pog again. Like, how dare you? Like, you're gonna.
But we could take Jackie. I was thinking like Roosevelt's wife, Eleanor.
Okay.
Is that her
Yeah.
name? I'm just off the top of my head, like she had some really great quotes that like I just read one the other day, and that just stuck out in my brain when you said that. And then if we're gonna take someone from wrestling, like I'm gonna go my ultimate hero, Stratus. And maybe I could combine those three.
Yeah. Like, yeah, she's great, and I think she ages in reverse. Yeah, it's so great. I love that she's still killing it. But I remember watching like wrestling in the Attitude Era in the '90s and stuff, and it was just basically her and Lita, But just to see how far women's wrestling and Mickey James, I think came into the mid 2000s, but how far that division all across wrestling has just evolved so much, and it's amazing to see. Did you come up with a name? I forget.
No, I didn't. I don't know. I don't want to jump the gun. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that one. I want it to be good.
Yeah. Should I ask ChatGPT real quick?
Yes.
All right. I've got to type this in. So. Are you enjoying this interview? Am I asking good questions? Because I know you do a lot of these.
Yes, thought-provoking questions, which is nice because, like, you do a ton of interviews and they're like, and why did you get into wrestling? And who's your favorite wrestler? And what's your dream match? And I'm like, you could Google that and, like, make it worthwhile,
I do have a wrestling nickname for I'm provide a wrestling nickname for a female that combines the personalities of Stratus.
Yeah.
We said Eleanor Roosevelt.
Mm-hmm. And Jackie.
Here we go.
Ooh.
Oh, this is so good. Are you ready? And it provided a description. Okay. How about the First Lady of Stratus? And then it says, this combines the regal, poised aura of Eleanor Roosevelt and Jackie O with the fierce, confident energy of Trish Stratus. I
love that.
First Lady invokes the dignified and political power. I don't know why I did this, but I feel like it's fitting. Invoke the dignified and political power for both Eleanor and Jackie, while Stratus adds the iconic wrestling edge, symbolizing strength and dominance in the ring. Like Trish's impact on WWE, it's a name that blends elegance, influence, and power. Boom. That's great.
Gosh, ChatGPT, that is perfect. I love it all.
Let's give ourselves some credit here because, again, it was us that gave the prompt, right? Like we got to give. No, you're right. ChatGPT is awesome. It's clutch. It pulls through.
I'm new to ChatGPT, and I just actually was telling Chelsea Green this today because Chelsea's sister
name drop.
Chelsea's sister was the one who was like, oh, just when you're writing a resume, just like run it through ChatGPT first, and it'll like make small changes. And I was like, oh, okay. I don't know. Now I like not going to get myself in trouble here, but like ran my homework through it to make sure it was good. Like,
Yeah. No, that's funny. That's awesome. Or like now on, you can just email me like, hey, Martin, I need you to like come up with a prompt for ChatGPT. I want to do a name game. So I'm just going to say random names, and whether you say one word or the first word that comes to mind, multiple words, just whatever you got. All right. First one is Jordan Grace.
Beast.
She looked great at the Rumble. She was, that was awesome.
My girl. She looked amazing.
Yeah. Madison Rain.
Queen came to mind, but then I was like, oh, that's my bestie. That's my travel buddy.
Chelsea Green.
Oh, well, she's the president of the United States right now.
I pledge my allegiance to Chelsea Green. My family, like, we could not. We were here for it. Her during the Rumble, and she's like, doing that to people as they're eliminated.
Yeah.
God, she's so great. And it's just,
So good.
and she's a great example too, where 2024 was an amazing year for her. And I know she won the women's US title, but even before that, she was like, she lost Money in the Bank, but she still somehow won. It's like like that night, it was just, people were just here for it. Right. I have a few more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bon Jovi.
Ooh. It's nothing to do with him, but fun story. The word is Desiree. That's my like childhood best friend, and I got like a Wii American Idol for Christmas one year, and we would sing Bon Jovi on that so many times, and we became like 10-time Wii American Idols because of Bon Jovi.
Have you ever shared that story before?
I don't think so.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. All right, following up from that, Bruce Springsteen.
Old.
Okay.
I'm not like a big Bruce fan. He's before my time.
Okay, all right. Last one for the name game. Chris Van Vliet.
He's a sweetheart. Like that's what came to mind. Like love him. He's great.
Yeah. All right. I have another. Let me get a little tongue tied. Another wrestling question, but it's a fun spin on it. I know you're
Okay.
the promotion you're in and everything, but if you could cash in a WWE Money in the Bank contract on anything in life other than a championship, what would it be?
Well, okay, two things came to mind. I think the first one is that if I could just like cash it in and get my master's degree, that would be great. Like without the work. That
fair.
would be awesome. The second thing, I guess, like in my personal life, Steve and I want to have a family, so I would cash it in and like, boom, be pregnant, and like have a baby.
I hope it happens for you guys. My wife and I have been married. We got married in 2002, and it's the love gets better every year. Like I love it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And my wife's a smoke show, so I feel like I hit the lottery. And we have 2 kids and a 13-year-old daughter, and my son will be 7 next week, and it's so exciting. I actually chaperoned my 13-year-old daughter's school dance a couple weeks ago, and she had no idea. So that was fun when I showed up and she sees me.
Oh,
Yeah, she wasn't happy, but
ruin her life,
I know.
Dad. Yeah.
All right, who is crazy? Are you ready for this one? This is actually my favorite question. Who is crazier, Steve Maclin or Chelsea Green?
Ooh. I'm gonna say Steve Maclin because Steve is willing to like physically put his body on the line and do some crazy stuff that I'm like, how did your brain even concoct that? That's physically possible. And then like we saw him do the no DQ with PCO where he was like literally drenched in blood. So he's crazier for that. Chelsea's crazy in like a fun, different way, but I think Steve is like legit crazy.
He and I are roughly the same age. It's because we grew up on the generation of Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, so that's
Yeah.
What are common misconceptions about professional wrestlers? Or we'll say female professional wrestlers.
The biggest one is that we're all like catty and don't like each other. And I don't know if it's just like my experience because my best friends are professional wrestlers and they're people that like I consider my family and will be my best friends for the rest of my life. I've met through wrestling. I find that's such a big misconception that we don't want to work together. We don't like each other. You brought up a really great point about Chelsea earlier that like she didn't win Money in the Bank, but that's her losing is what we talked about, right? And I think that the women that I surround myself with, my best friends in this business, all see value in putting each other over and working for each other. And like, you're going to push me off the ladder, but I want to do that for you because it's going to give you the win. But I'm going to also look good coming out of it. There's a balance between being a little bit selfish and making the moment also about you, but doing it because it's going to make someone else look good too. And so I think that the misconception is we don't do that for each other, that we're selfish and we're catty and we're political. And maybe some women are, but my experience is that I surround myself with women who aren't like that. I surround myself with women who love each other and want to see each other succeed more than we want to see ourselves succeed sometimes.
I love it because, I mean, a rising tide lifts all boats. And me as a fan, I'm, and my daughter, we're all benefiting. Like my 13-year-old daughter who loves wrestling, we're all benefiting from it because it's just better matches. And it just seems, it's great. Even going back to Chelsea, like that Money in the Bank that she lost, that was in her home country too. So it was like the perfect setup. And even again, it might have been late 2023 or sometime in 2024 when Clash in the Castle, I forget when that was. Chelsea wasn't in the match, but she was, escorted Piper Niven. But there's a point where, again, she won the crowd over because she got kicked out of the arena or whatever, and then she comes back in with the mask on, and the way she's running, it's just like these nuances, and it's just, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that you can find those moments where like you can carve it out and make it about you, but also know that like when it's not about me, it's okay to not be about me. I love just the opportunity that we kind of talked about that earlier. Like I'm a team player, win, lose, draw. I just want to be out there wrestling. I don't need to win the title. I don't need to, be the champion and be number one in the, in the rankings and all these things. Like I just need to be out there to make my mark. And I think that the more wrestling in general realizes that you can make yourself look good while also losing, we'd all benefit from it. But yeah, I think just to tie it back, the biggest misconception is that women's wrestlers are catty and don't like each other, and I just find that to be so untrue in my circle.
Yeah, and again, you've been doing this for 13 years, so that's great to hear.
Yeah.
All right. Did you work at Abercrombie and Fitch?
I did.
All right, so I have. All right. Stay with me on this one, Deonna, please, because I can't stop laughing. Hold on. All right. In a perfect world, we'll say you were a store manager of one. Pick 6 people from the wrestling world to be your staff, and then I have a follow-up question to that, but I want to see what you say first.
6 people. I mean, I think I'd pick a lot of my friends. So I'd pick like Chelsea Green. I'd pick Wendy Chu. I'd pick Tasha Steeles. So that's 3. I'd pick Jordan. And then I guess we need like some guy. I mean, I guess I'd pick Steve, right? Gotta employ the husband. And then maybe I'd pick like I was gonna say Josh Alexander because that's just like our friend. But Steve and I were talking about Fandango earlier today, and I feel like Dango would just make us all laugh. So maybe we go with him. I don't know.
Okay, no, that's great. So and the answer can't be Steve or Fandango, but one person has to stand. One guy, pick a guy to stand outside. They always have the guy with no shirt, but they're wearing a scarf. Yeah. At least like what I can remember. But who would be the guy that would stand outside? But has the jeans on, no shirt, but a scarf around his neck, and whether they're good and smolders the whole time.
I want to say Matt
That's
Cardona
exactly
because
what I was
he'd
going to
hate
say.
it.
That's exactly who I was. But
that would be like the vein of his existence if he had to do that. It would be funny to us to make him do that.
That's so funny. Like I hope to meet him one day because it's just the pure like it. I don't know. It'll be hilarious. Last couple questions. What was something people would be surprised to learn about you?
I mean, I initially was gonna say that like I have an interest in politics, but then I feel like I've been more open recently about that. I'm like getting a political science degree, and so I feel like maybe that wouldn't be such a surprise, but I'm not sure because I feel like we started this conversation. I was like, I'm an open book. I'll talk about anything. Maybe that I'm actually very, very shy. I feel like people don't know that. Like, I actually really hate to be like the center of attention in my real life. It's like the vein of my existence to be looked at and like strangers talk to me or things. Like I get social anxiety very, very quick.
Yeah. I feel like that kind of makes sense though because of your profession where like even if you were an extrovert, like it makes you an introvert does the reverse because I mean, there's so much that you have to do and you're like you take your personality and you have to amplify it by 100 on TV you know,
Mhm.
and then it's just like, man, it's got to be draining. So like that makes sense that you would just be shy or just introvert when you finally get to like just chill.
Yeah, I mean, Steve and I laugh because I'm like, I'm not nice. Like, I have a great heart, but I'm not a nice person. And he laughs because I'm just like, no new friends. Don't need new friends. Have enough friends. Like, I'm very introverted in my real life. And any friend that I do have, like, it's because Chelsea was friends with them first, and I just like tag along. Like, I love Maxine Dupree. I love her so much, but like, obviously she works with Chelsea. They would travel together for a while, but like, I would never put myself out there to make her be my friend if it wasn't for my best friend being her friend first. I'm just so introverted like that. Like, and I don't think people know that about me.
No, that's good. Thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate that. All right, last two
Yeah.
questions. If there's a giant billboard with your picture, and this is actually kind of a real thing, I guess it could happen, but if there's a giant billboard with your picture on it for the world to see and it had your leadership message on it, one, what would you want your message to say? And two, where would you want that billboard to be?
Oh gosh. I feel like, and maybe the theme of this podcast has been like strength through authenticity, maybe something like that, like strength through integrity, like something like that. Like, those are really like big values to me as a person. So I feel like that is what it would say, like strength through authenticity or something. And maybe I think Times Square, like the biggest place we could have it. Like, I want to be the big screen in Times Square.
That's love it, and it makes sense, right? From you're from that part of the country.
Yeah.
I read Brene Brown, and I've always, and even before I read her book, but she talks about coincidentally in her own ventures that to me strength is more than how much someone can lift in the gym, how many weights they can lift. Like, vulnerability equals strength, and I think that's what makes you so strong is your open vulnerability. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, last question. I got to give a shout out to my guy Shane, my buddy Shane. He's a wrestling fan, and we were actually in a podcast mastermind together last year. And it was Chris Van Vliet's podcast mastermind, so it was pretty cool. But my buddy Shane, like he gave me this question, so I've been recently adding it to the end of my podcast. I think you'll be the fourth or fifth person I've asked this to.
Okay.
What is one piece of wisdom would you pass on to the next generation of people to help them light their own torch and carry it forward?
Ooh, the first thing that came to mind is something my dad told me when I was young, that if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And I think that obviously I have loved what I've done my entire life. And I don't feel like when I go to work, I'm at a job. Like, I love it. And so I think that's something that I'd like to pass on, is find something you're passionate about that doesn't feel like you're at work every day, and live your life that way. And it doesn't have to be the same thing, right? Like, yes, I've loved wrestling since I was 9 years old. All I've ever wanted to do was be a professional wrestler, and I've been for 13 years. But now I'm at the point where I'm like, can't wrestle forever. Finding what my next passion is. What's the next job that I'm going to love enough that it doesn't feel like a job? And that's going to be like a lifelong struggle of reinventing ourselves. But if we can find something that we love enough that doesn't feel like a job every day, then we're going to have fun every day.
I could see you being a professor at like Rutgers or something, and it's teaching like a history type class. Oh, you know what? It would be Jackie O 101 with Professor Deonna, Professor D.
Oh, you know what? Maybe. I don't know. I always tell Steve, like, maybe I'm going to be a congresswoman in Florida.
Yeah.
Or I would love to, be a history professor. Yeah, there's just so many options. I was a teacher before wrestling became my full-time job, preschool teacher, and I loved that. So yeah, I don't know what my next job will be, but I hope that I can love it just as much as I've loved wrestling this long.
Do you have any parting thoughts or parting shots that you want to share with everyone?
No, I don't think so. I think I've given you all I got. Like, be true to yourself, be authentic, stand in your beliefs and don't waver from them. I think that's all that I've ever tried to embody. Like, the Deonna you've talked to today, for the last hour is the Deonna you'd talk to if you showed up at my front door. I'm me, and I own every bit of me, good, bad, perfect, imperfect. And you know, I'm so proud of that, and I'm so proud of how I've built my business that way, and how I'll continue to live my life that way. And I would always encourage everyone to feel the same. Be so confident that no one could ever shake that from you.
That's the perfect way to end that. Thank you so much.
Boom.
What can I do? What
Yeah.
can I do for you? How can I best serve you?
Oh gosh, I have no idea. I feel like just being able to chat has served me tremendously.
You served me tremendously. Thank you very much, Madam Virtuosa.
Yeah.
Like, thank you very much. Deonna, like, thank you again. I feel super comfortable with you, and man, this is really cool. I don't know how else to explain it, and I'm not the best at showing gratitude. Like, I feel it, but I have a hard time like showing it. But man, this really does mean a lot to me. Yeah, just thank you so much. Man, I'm at a loss for words.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy we got to do it. And anything else you need, Steve and I are here. So.
Cool.